Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday evening podcast. I'm Danny Hozak. I'm the chairman of the Economic Education Association and the president of the Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition. And this podcast is our joint effort to talk to people about the future of Alberta, to talk about our future, the future of our party, our children, our grandchildren, and our province's future. I'm thrilled tonight. Well, I'll introduce you to our guest in just a few minutes, but for some opening remarks, I just want to say that I actually attended the founding meeting of the Reform Party in Vancouver in 1986, and following that, a whole host of patriotic Canadians sent Preston Manning to Ottawa with a very sincere and heartfelt message saying the West wants in. Well, here we are, approximately 45 years later, and we're still kneeling on the doorstep of Confederation with our hat in our hands and their hands in our pockets. And a lot of us have turned our focus from getting into Canada to getting out of it, and so that's sort of going to be the theme of our talk tonight. Ron is actually a scientist. He's a retired scientist, but he's retired and he spends a lot of time studying this. And one of the things that we want to talk about is uh, and it's just the journey that we're on. As you know, following the reform thing, that was in the late '80s. We had the reform we want in 2000. Stephen Harper and a group of people from Calgary penned what's become known as the firewall letter, which, as you know, they talked about having our own pension plan, collecting our own income tax, taking over healthcare, having our own police force, and and that the firewall letter created a lot of interest for quite some time, but mostly nothing ever came of it. As if 15 or 20 years after that, uh, well, actually, Ron's going to talk about this I think it was in the '90s, or maybe it was sometime in the 2000s. Our current premier Danielle Smith wrote a letter to then Premier Jason Kenney, telling him what she thought he should do. And as you know, Jason Kenney campaigned and got elected on ending equalization. And subsequent to getting elected, did very little about it. And then 2 years later, when the heat was growing from disgruntled voters and taxpayers, he created the Fair Deal panel and spent tens of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars, I don't know for sure, traveling the province asking people for input as to what they thought they should do. And they came back with a pretty clear recommendation they should get out of it. So then he said, well, we'll schedule a referendum and see if you really want us to do what the panel has said that you want us to do, and what I got elected on. And so we had a referendum on equalization, in which 62% of the people in the province voted to do something about ending equalization. And Jason, Premier, Kenny sent a few sternly worded letters to Ottawa, and then changed the subject to something else. And so here we are, almost another 15 years later. Danielle Smith is talking about she got elected on having her own pension plan, her own police force, collecting her own taxes, and has done very little about it in almost 2 years since the last election. Now they're traveling the province. Talking with the Next Step panel, talking about what are the next steps. Well, I think the theme of what we're going to talk about is, like, your next step should be to do what you promised to do when we elected you. And I attended the Next Step panel in Lloydminster last week, and I suggested that the Alberta Prosperity Project has collected 400,000 signatures of intent to sign a petition to force a referendum on independence. And my suggestion to Danielle, or to Premier Smith, was, don't make us do what don't make us force you to do what you know you should be doing anyway, which is having a referendum. And I suggested that she should just schedule a referendum for May 1st of 2026. And so, having said that, she thanked me. I had 47 seconds to say that. It took me 51. She thanked me very much, and in about took about 5 minutes to say that she was basically hoping to talk to all the other provinces and convince them to work together to solve some of the problems that we're all concerned about, even though they haven't been solved in the first 120 some years of our province. So what I wanted to, I'd like to take a moment now and just introduce our guest. It's Ron Voss. I think he tweets under, or maybe he writes under a dog with a bone headline, but he certainly, when he gets his teeth into things, he's pretty, he's pretty concise and he's pretty thorough. And so, David, if you could make Ron Voss show up on our screen, I'd like to welcome you. Hello, Ron. Thanks for taking time to join us, and thanks for all the work you've done. I look at as Ron is what I call an invaluable unpaid researcher for both our economic group and our Wild Rose Party. Because when I don't have time to do something, I will call Ron and say, "Well, Ron, I've heard that this is what the facts are. Could you actually look into that and prove me right or prove me wrong?" Which yeah, and I don't. Usually, I'm quite ambivalent as to whether one way or the other. I have a lot of respect for the way you can look at the numbers and sort of make them understandable to senior citizens like myself. So, Ron, thank you for being here tonight. How are you tonight?
I'm fine, Danny. I
Good.
was just thinking, normally we talk to one another while you're driving along with your truck, but this is a little
I
different.
know I'm probably a lot safer right now, unless the bookshelf falls over on me or something. I should be all right. But yes, I know we spent a lot of time talking, and I appreciate your input. And one of the things that one of the things, and I guess we'll get to it in a couple of minutes here. But you were telling me about a letter that Premier Smith, wrote
Okay,
to
yeah,
Jason Kenney, before while he was premier and before she was, suggesting all the things that he should do. And do you want to
yeah.
sort of touch on that letter a little bit?
Oh,
Like, or,
absolutely. Like on X, I mean,
yes,
I think you just keep repeating things if you got a good story, So
yes,
whenever something comes up, I just remind her and mind everybody about it. It was in 2019. That was only 6 years ago. And she wrote it was actually an article in the paper. It was in the Edmonton Journal, the Calgary Herald. And like it was entitled, How Alberta Can Stop Acting Like Canada's Doormat. And she doesn't need this next panel to tell her what to do, because she told Kenny what to do on, get your own police force, collect your own taxes, pension plan, all the things that she's bringing up now in her next panel. And she told Kenny that he should do these in order to dampen the independence movement. And of course, he didn't do it when he was premier. And now she's premier, and she hasn't done any of it. And another thing, I guess my reason for supporting her was I was expecting that. And another thing she did, her current chief of staff is Rob Anderson, right?
yes,
And he wrote the Free Alberta strategy document. And in that document, it said all these things we should do. And one of the things it said is create a sovereignty act. Well, she did that, but all the rest of it, she hasn't. And that was my expectation for her, that she was going to do this. And so I'm incredibly disappointed in terms of that. And
well,
I'm watching some of the
I
examples. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that those of us who have watched politics over the years is that if somebody wants to get something done, generally speaking, they try to get it done in the first 2 years of their mandate. And then
Yeah,
once they get past the first 2 years of their mandate, they start coasting into sort of setting up for the next election campaign.
yeah,
And somebody called me the other day and with some of the thoughts that they had on, what their strategy be for the next campaign. I said, well, before you start like promising us what you're going to do in the next campaign, how about keeping the promises you kept in the last campaign? And like you say, when she told Jason Kenney what to do, and I mean,
yeah.
they all consider, Prime Minister, Harper as one of their key advisors, but he also advised the government to do it back in was it
2001.
2000 or 2001 when they wrote the. So we're looking at we're heading into 25 years that the leaders of our province have been, saying this is what should be done for our province. But I don't think we're one step closer to having it done than we were 25 years ago, maybe even less, because people get tired of us sort of rallying, say, "Oh well, get it, join us, we'll make this happen." But it never seems to happen, does it? And
Yeah.
the the most recent thing is this, like the Alberta Prosperity Project has sent their question in, and then Elections Alberta sent the question to the courts, and which, as I think you and I talked about this, there's the question, they sent it to the court saying, well, this should be the question unless it's unconstitutional. And we had Dennis Modry on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said, how can a question
Yeah.
questioning the constitutionality of the questioning the Constitution, how can it be unconstitutional to question the Constitution? But yet that seems like what it is. And and I don't know if it was you that mentioned this to me or someone else, but the most disturbing thing about this is that they've sort of added that unless it's unconstitutional into their presentation to the judge, almost hinting to them that we think, well, maybe you could call this unconstitutional. Have you were sort of telling me about how that's unfolding. I didn't watch the court cases, but maybe you could sort of tell us how that unfolded.
Well, yeah. I mean, they amended the Alberta, what do you call it? The act.
Sovereignty Act, or well, it's our version of the Clarity Act, yes,
No, no,
isn't it?
civic. What is it? What's that act that you can make a
Oh,
petition?
Citizen Initiative Act, yes,
Initiative Act. Okay,
yeah,
and so she lowered the threshold, which is appropriate because it was so high you'd never reach it, and everybody
yes,
was so excited. Look what she's done! It's tremendous. And like I mentioned, she also threw a poison pill in there. She put that clause in there that the chief electoral officer, can take it to the court and determine if it violates the Canadian Constitution 1982. And so, I mean, he was almost obligated. He's not quite sure, so he took it to the court. And I'm quite convinced in that it says sections 1 to 35.1. Well, 35 or 35.1 relates to Indigenous rights. And I'm quite convinced that's going to be the major topic. I mean, the chiefs are all going to be in there, and they're going to be claiming you can't. Well, even the other night, when this guy, was it Stephen Buffalo, said, forget it.
yes.
You're not going to achieve this because all the chiefs are against this. And we have the Constitution for us here. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that this is going to sail along quite smoothly. And it may all be kiboshed by that. And then she's responsible, and people are blaming the chief electoral officer. No. She's the one who set this up. It's almost like she teed it up and he took a swing. And so
Well,
people have to realize she's doing this. And I'll mention something. She said in an interview, my job is to bring the numbers down. And she also said, my job is to make sure that it doesn't get to yes. So I'm saying everything she does, everything has to be understood in that context, including the next panel. That's what it's all about, to get the numbers down and make sure it doesn't get to yes. And so what she inserted in the Citizen Initiative Act will do exactly that. I don't know. Like, okay, depending, when you go to the court, whatever the decision, then it can be appealed. And maybe we're all the way to the Supreme Court. You got time for 5 years? I don't think so. So I think she's purposely done that. And,
well,
yeah, so,
yeah,
and then
and I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
she also mentions, I think it was in Edmonton at the end. She said, I think we should have some of the powers that Quebec has. Well, what do you think? And when she told Kenny to get them 6 years ago, and then, like I was telling you, Danny, she quotes Michael Binion, because he had a message. Well, in 1930 this happened. So slowly we've been gaining powers. So she's using that spin now. Well, I think maybe we've grown up a bit as a province, so we can get all these powers, like our own police force and blah blah blah. And that's the way she's spinning the story now. Why she's doing all this and thinks she's growing up. And yet 6 years ago, she told Kenny to do exactly those things. So it's all spin from these people, I'm telling you.
It is, and as you know, the Alberta Prosperity Project, and one of the things I want to talk about, before we end tonight is uh, Corey Morgan's book,
Yeah,
The Sovereignist Handbook, because if you look behind me, you can see two of Wagner's book. One is No Other Option, the other is Time to Leave. But I
yeah,
mean, he makes a good case for why there's no other option. He makes a good case for why there's time to leave. But Corey Morgan has done a wonderful, but he didn't really say how to get it done. And I just got finished reading Corey Morgan's book, and it's absolutely a wonderful handbook on how to get it done. And I mean, certainly he points out the challenges as well. But the
yeah,
the first thing is, I mean, and what I told Danielle at the Alberta Next panel in Lloyd was, don't make us force you to do the right thing. You know what the right thing is. I said I think a majority of people in Alberta are already inclined to vote yes to leaving, but I said just call the referendum and let's spend our time having an intelligent, respectful discussion about the pros and cons of it. But and I think it was you that mentioned to me that Jeff Rath, when they sent the question to the courts, Jeff Rath, on behalf of the Prosperity Project, moved to strike the question and have it thrown out.
yeah,
And the judge asked the Alberta lawyer if he'd like to basically second that. And he said, "Well, no, do what you want, but if you do proceed, we'd like
yeah,
to be an intervener." Which
yeah.
I mean, again, is another pretty clear signal to the judge. Well, we'd like to go this further, this to go further. And I guess we don't know whether we want it to go further because they honestly want clarification, or whether they're just stalling for time. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so, but what I said to Danielle, or Premier Smith, the other night, I said, like, if your government fiddles around with the referendum question, fiddles around with the timing of the referendum, I said the next election will actually be a referendum on independence, because one of the things that Corey Morgan says in his book is, like don't be too worried about, he said there's a place for the smaller parties, but he
mhm,
said if you really want independence, like go to your UCP nomination events and be sure you nominate someone who says, if I get elected, I'll be working every day to have an independent Alberta. And I actually thought that was, it was really pretty good advice. It'll certainly create some interesting nomination events, if we get. And I mean, my friends tell me from inside the party that, oh, most of the rural MLAs want independence. And I said, well, I wonder if they've told the premier that, or if they're just telling their constituents that. Because I think one of the things we all know about politicians is sometimes they have two stories, like one in Edmonton and another one, out in the country. But on the other hand, I think Corey's advice to us, who really do want to at least have the discussion, have an informed debate about how it could
mhm.
go forward, is to be involved in the UCP party, and press them in the nomination process to nominate a whole bunch of candidates that are, if you want to call it, on our side on this issue. So I guess there's lots to do, isn't there?
Yeah. I guess you can try within, but when we had that by-election, they elected, what's the lady, Sawyer?
Yes.
They didn't have a nomination. Smith chose her because she didn't want a nomination, because she wants them all to be for, not for independence. That's why she
I,
did it that way. So
I
yeah,
know that. Yeah.
tried, but then
Yeah.
or
You-
like Nadine
you-
Wellwood was, she wasn't allowed. So
well,
I'm not so
the
sure.
Well, no, I'm
Maybe
not.
both
No,
approaches. I
no,
think.
you're actually right. But the point of doing the approach is, if you get someone that's a serious independent and the party throws the person out of the party, it makes them a really good candidate for another party. And say, look, clearly they don't want that. And I mean, as you know, so many of these people, I look at Drew Barnes. I mean, everybody always says they're going to go to Edmonton to represent their constituents, but Drew Barnes tried to represent his constituents, and all that happened was he got thrown out of caucus.
Yeah.
And so, like my friend says, you don't have to hang everybody, you just have to hang somebody, and everybody pays attention. So the clear message to everyone else was, like, hold the line or you won't be in caucus. So it's not as easy to represent your constituents as they would like to let on. So it is a grind. And I mean, like you say, I think I always say, we're all fighting the same war, but we can't be at the same. We can't all be at this every battle together. And so there's going to be battles at the constituency level. There's going to be some of these other parties working together. As you know, I think I just forget if you were in like Cory Morgan, and there was a whole host of us in Brooks a few months ago talking about, when Dennis Modry was there, and Vince Byfield and one thing or another, and we were talking about how to move things forward and how to get how to get the petition signed and one thing or another. And we pretty much all agreed there that we would all work together to try and get the referendum question, on the ballot, and then we would work together to try and win the referendum. You know what I mean? I think as everybody works to win the referendum, you'll see who, as an MLA or as a potential candidate or as a different party or whatever, as we move forward trying to campaign in favor of or against the referendum. I see Thomas Lukasik with his idiocy question. You know what I mean? In any event, Danielle or Premier Smith asked about that the other night, and I said, well, really, like, and you pointed this out to me, Ron, like the referendum question that the Prosperity Project is trying to get on a ballot. It is covered by the Clarity Act. It's in our Constitution. If you want to leave, you have to have a referendum. You have to have a clear question. You have to win a majority. But what Lukasik is actually talking about is just a popularity poll. It's not. I mean, I said to the premier, I said, well, it's actually two sides of the same question. Do you want to stay or do you want to go? It's only actually one question, yes or no. But I said his isn't actually a legitimate question. But if they don't mind, I guess they're collecting signatures. I suppose they could use them for the no vote. But really, what they're, as you pointed out to me, what he's working on is more of a petition thing, where even if they do get the signatures, there
Well,
doesn't have to be a referendum on it. Yeah.
yeah, well, okay, it goes to the Citizen Initiative Act. And if you read the act, what happens after you get the signatures varies with the type of petition or proposal you have. His
Okay.
is classified as policy, okay?
Okay.
And the APP one obviously is a constitutional petition.
Right.
And with the constitutional petition, it's pretty simple what it says. If you get the number of signatures, it goes to the lieutenant governor, and then by order in council, that is Smith, she has to. The act says she will call a referendum. Now, I don't think it'll be binding, but it's specific, she will. For a policy one, it says, well, it comes to the legislature and they'll probably strike a committee and talk about it, and they may make a report, or they may suggest a referendum. Well, I don't think they would ever suggest a referendum for this. So it's kind of annoying that when you hear Smith talking, she's saying, well, I'm not going to call a referendum, but there's that one, Lukuzik, and to get the signatures, it'll be on the ballot with my questions. That's not true. It wouldn't be, I don't think, and it shouldn't be. The legislature guys wouldn't say, well, this should be on a ballot to specify we stay where we are. So
Well,
and the judge
like,
has called it a nothing burger. You wouldn't put a nothing
like,
burger on the ballot. So for her to
well,
say that is wrong. She doesn't even read her own Citizen Initiative Act.
you're right. And anybody in the legislature who wanted to have their name on the ballot in the future wouldn't want to put this on a ballot. Like it would
No,
be
no,
political suicide for them. Clearly, you know what I mean. But
no.
again,
It's hardly going to be. I mean, I guess they have to go to the legislature, that the little committee, and put a report
I,
out and say this was a joke and that was the end of it.
I,
And that's why. I mean, I keep saying when she says my job is to bring the numbers down and make sure we don't get to yes. People have to keep that in mind. They're so great what she's doing. Keep in mind that everything she's doing is to bring that down. And by putting that clause in the act, she sent it to the courts. It shouldn't go to the courts. We're trying to leave Canada in its constitution, and now we have to be not violating it in order to leave. It's absolutely silly. And I guess I've written a blog post called Connecting the Dots, and I've talked about that in some detail. And my concern is how Rath is going to argue the case. Okay. Now, is Rath going to argue the case, say, no, no, no. What we do is it was going to be not violating the Constitution? Or is he going to argue, this doesn't make any sense. We shouldn't even be talking about this? If he talks about not violating the Constitution, one of my concerns is he may be encouraged to modify his question and say blah, 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 and what we do will not violate Section 35 of the Constitution, which is Indigenous rights. If he puts that in, I'm not voting for it, okay? And a lot of people won't be. It'll split our efforts, and I think that'll just destroy the whole thing. So this whole thing going to the courts is serious. I don't even know whether we're ever going to get a question, because if it
Well,
gets tied up in the courts, so you're like you're saying, it may be the only thing that's possible is the election.
I
I don't
mean,
know.
yeah, like I mean, as you know, we were on the same team as Danielle for several elections, and we, love her like family. But having said that, her job is to do like she got elected to do what the majority of Albertans want done. And to me, this is this is like the referee saying, "Well, my job is to see that Calgary Stampeders win the Grey Cup." You think, well, no, your job is to apply the rules as they're laid out, and we have a fair contest and let the best man win. But I mean, for her to say like, and to me, all she has to say is, I will try my best to do what the majority of Albertans vote to do. But I mean, this is
No,
clearly it's a violation of trust to say my job is to get the numbers down. How is that fair to the, I mean, Mike, like, I see some polling where 70 or 75% of the UCP party want independence. So I mean, if 75% of her members want independence, and she's saying my job is to get the numbers down, uh, she'll be like Jason Kenney. They'll both be working for a big law firm before long if we're not careful. If they're not careful.
well,
But I
it's
mean,
even
I guess
worse
that's
when she
their
says,
worry.
"I don't
Yes.
want, I don't,"
Yeah.
and it doesn't get to yes. It doesn't get there to yes.
I, I
Okay.
I know, but but the thing is, to me, the more they frig with the system, the more it will inspire the people who want it to do something, and it will turn the next election into a referendum on independence. And I mean, you said, well, maybe the next election, the winning team will say we'll have a referendum if we get elected. And I said, well, I think the team, if we don't have a vote on independence if we don't have a referendum before the next election, I think there will be a party that says, if you vote for us, we will declare and we win, we'll declare
Yeah,
independence the day after the election. So then the election will be the vote on independence. But having said that, we're a long ways like we were at the Canada Strong and Free yesterday. I guess Friday and Saturday, and I one of the reasons I went I went was to see what Conrad Black had to say, because as you know, I could Conrad Black has I consider him a national treasure. I mean, he's like most of us. He's had a few rough spots in his life, but to me, all in all, I look at him as a Canadian intellectual who's well worth listening to. And at the end of his hour-long speech, which he gave yesterday without any notes, he said, "If I had been treated as shabbily as Alberta has in the past, I would vote to leave." And he said, "I'm a committed Federalist, but if I had been treated as shabbily as you have, I would vote to leave." And again, going back to you know, uh, you know, Preston Manning in 1986 saying, "We want in." Ted Byfield at the time said, "Tell them you're leaving and mean it. That's the only way you'll get any traction." And that's what I said to Premier Smith the other night at the Alberta Next panel, not in my 51 seconds, but afterwards. And, she, in her answer to me, she said, "Oh, I think I can bring all the premiers together, and I think I can do this, and think I can do that." And I said, "Well, Premier, like I said, your new best friend, Donald Trump, like he didn't make NATO work by saying, oh, they're a nice bunch of people. And I think if I go there and, schmooze with them and talk to them nice, I can make them into an effective organization. He actually said he actually said they're a worthless, outdated, useless organization. I don't think they're worth the money. And I think they should be disbanded, and I want rid of them, and I don't want to have anything to do with them." Well, I said, now they're flying over here in their private jets with a check to pay their 5% commitment to NATO. So I said, like, even if you want to fix the country, your only hope of fixing it is to tell them you're leaving and mean it. And
yeah,
then maybe you'll get some serious proposals from them. But
yeah.
so anyway, going back to, I think it was Keith Wilson spoke yesterday, and he
Oh,
just gave an amazing presentation on
I like
what
Keith.
this means. And one of the things that you mentioned, the Indigenous, and there's a couple of things there. You know what I mean? But he said the BC really has some problems with treaties because they don't have any treaties. But he said there's three treaties, I think it is in Alberta, 6, 7, and 8, and he said they're all very clearly written, as clear as you could ever write
Right.
anything. It says in return for these reserve lands, we permanently cede everything else, to the crown. So there, he said there's just no question that all the other land has been ceded to us. So then the question is what to do with the reserves. And again, I talked to Stephen Buffalo about this, at the Alberta Next panel, and he said, "Well, you should go talk to Henry Lewis." And I said, well, "I've known Henry for 40 or 50 years," but I said, "I don't really need to talk to him. He's just got one vote, just like you do, and just like I do." But I said, "You're lucky," because I said, like, for the people who don't want to leave, if 51% of the people vote to leave, well, the people who don't want to leave only have two choices: come with us and move to another province. But the First Nations actually, they have their own unique choice to make, and they could make it on a reserve by reserve basis, or they could make it as a united group, and they could either choose to come with us, as Bruce Party said, as real citizens for the first time in their life, instead of as, what are they, serfs on federal government land? I don't really know what they are, but he said for the first time in our history, they would be living on their own land. They would be individual. They would be Albertans just like the rest of us. But I said to him, if you don't want to come, you're lucky. You can just stay with the rest of Canada, and you can deal with the rest of Canada. Let them honor your treaties. Let them honor them. We will move on with our life, and we will wish you well, and we'll go from there. You know what I mean? So I think we'll have a lot more problems than dealing with the First Nations. And Keith said, like, they really, and the moderator said, well, you're absolutely committed to independence. Like, where do you draw the red line on this is what I won't do to get independence? He said, well, he said it absolutely has to be with violence. He said there can't be violence. He said no one on any side should be considering or promoting or condoning or even talking about any kind of violence. I said, like you said, we're living in a peaceful civil society. As you know, one of the things our economic group prides ourselves in is holding, a basically a respectful debate where you listen to both sides of the debate, you look at the pros and cons of the different options, and then as a group you decide what's best for all of you. You know what I mean? And I think most rational analysis of Alberta's situation in Canada says we would be better off as an independent country. And I mean, again, even Premier Smith brought up, oh, we'd be landlocked. Well, for one thing, like 80 some percent of what I know, talk about stealing NDP talking points. You know what I mean? But as 80 some percent of what Alberta sells goes to America. So as long as the American border isn't closed, we're not landlocked. We can sell
No,
whatever we want.
but apart from that, Danny, we're landlocked now
Well,
because of the
yeah,
situation.
yeah, it's not like we can
If you
landlock it.
are
Yeah,
an independent country, if BC wants to ship stuff to Ontario, we're going to stop them at the border, okay? And have
yes,
it, whatever, look
yeah,
for rats. I mean, this is
yeah,
ridiculous. We'd have a lot more power as a country, and even I don't like the United Nations, but apparently, like Switzerland's, like a lot of
yeah,
countries are landlocked, which get access because they should get it. So
yeah.
we would have
No,
more
like,
power, not
like,
less. That's a
like,
stupid argument.
landlocked is just about as stupid as some of the CO2, we're all
Oh,
going to die from global warming arguments. You know what I
okay.
mean?
Here's
But
one thing I want to say.
okay,
My vision of an independent Alberta is an Alberta free of Carney's Canada and free of this scam of net carbon zero. And that means we got to be free of Smith because she embraces it. This is nonsense. And this is what's going to kill the country. This whole nonsense about climate change and the way he pushes it all the time. It's going to kill Canada. That's a major issue. And it's a fantasy, net carbon zero. It's
it,
ridiculous.
it, it is. It's an absolute fantasy, which pretty much the whole world is starting to recognize again, thanks to Donald Trump for just calling it out and saying we're not having anything to do with this, and the whole thing is falling apart, which, well, it should. So
Well, no, and
anyway,
then Smith said, we're going to get there faster than anywhere else. Oh, really? Well,
over
how?
yeah,
Carbon capture? That's it?
yeah,
That's all
well,
it takes? What
like I
nonsense.
know I still hear the government talking about, hydrogen and one thing another. I realize you don't sell either natural gas or hydrogen in gallons, but my understanding is it takes 2 gallons of natural gas to make a gallon of hydrogen. And anybody who's ever been on a farm and had anything to do with oxygen bottles, like it's a lot easier to deal with a low pressure propane bottle than it is a high pressure oxygen bottle. So I think I'd far sooner deal with the natural gas than hydrogen for almost anything. You know what I mean? So there's just a whole host of things where these people have got caught up in this. I don't know who started it. Uh, like, I mean, it goes back to Trudeau and the whole climate scam. It goes back to Rio de Janeiro and CAP and all this stuff. It was a long-term plan. It actually goes back to in the West. It goes back to the Regina Manifesto, where there was a group of socialists who got together and they were hoping to create, a socialist utopia on the prairies. Which I don't know why they wanted that, because most of them had just escaped from a socialist dystopia in Russia and Ukraine and one thing or another. But in any event, they wanted to create it, and they wanted to get control of the municipal governments, the schools, the universities, the bureaucracy. Well, I mean, if you look at the list right now, they got about 90% of it done, and now we're fighting back from that, aren't we? But I do think the tide has turned. I think one of the things they said at the thing yesterday, the high schools, all the high schools had elections in this last election, and virtually all the high schools that were, I just forget exactly where all the high schools they were recording from, but all the high schools elected that they had the mock elections, and all the high schools elected like conservative candidates. You know what I mean? And so I think I think we do need to reach out to the youth, because they're starting to look at this stuff, and they're pretty darn smart. They're pretty darn smart, and I mean they're getting their information, and that's why I appreciate you coming on here and trying to spread the word with our podcast. Where, as you know, your letters to the editor and that sort of thing are reaching out to people, and so you know. I think we're going in the right direction. We just have to. And one of the things I thought of it, but it turns out Corey Morgan wrote about it years before I thought of it. But he talked about a lot of people get excited about politics and they go at it, 100%, and then they burn out, and 7 months later they're tired of politics and they've given up. And what I say to my friends is, if you're tired, don't quit, just rest. And take pace yourself, just work away at it. I think that's one of the things that you do a pretty good job of. You just work at it a little bit every day. You're not burning yourself out, but you just keep working at it, one thing at a time. We're making a point here, a point there, and I think you've got your town council at least. At least they know you're coming. I don't know if you're gaining, but you certainly have. They know you're around, don't they?
Peter Guthrie, like
Yes,
so he told me one time, people in Cochrane don't like me, but I think he meant the mayor when he said that.
yes, yeah.
How do you
Well,
like my flag back there, Danny?
it looks pretty good to me. I
I
got
got
it. I got
about
to get
six
it.
of them in
I,
my
I,
house, two outside.
I've got an Alberta flag. We took it to one of our conferences, and I haven't got the tub unpacked yet. So I've been meaning to go and like get it. So I've got to get a better background, but I'm going to get an Alberta flag. I think
There you
that's a
go.
great idea.
I
So
just
anyway, well, thanks for visiting with us on fairly short notice. And is there anything we're missing here? I think
Well, I guess one thing I'd like to talk about, and I posted a lot on X, I put together a little report card. Smith said, within 6 months of whoever is the prime minister, I've got 9 things that I
yes,
need to be addressed. Must be. And to my mind, all 9, not one.
yeah,
And so I keep a report card. So I'm into end of August. That's 4 months. And of course, it's all no's right now. And I
yes,
guess it's interesting how's Albertans going to respond, because he's not going to meet it. And how are they going to respond? Is that going to drive up our independence? And what is she going to do? Logically, she should. If she doesn't get what he gives her, logically she would pivot and say, "Okay, I'm going on on the independent side." But I don't believe she will. And I think she could even call an early election in the spring for a mandate to continue doing nothing. I mean, so it's going to be interesting what happens after he doesn't comply with what she wants. I mean, that's another thing I keep pushing. So every time I can, I just put that report card out there and say, check it out.
Well,
So,
as you know, like Bruce Party said,
Yeah,
The worst thing for Alberta independence would be if he did one or two or three of those things, because he said they really
I
are
know.
sort of band-aids
Those
on
are
the
just
major
policy
problem.
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just policy questions. They're just they're and so but again, see, like they can do that if they want, but I think it's like putting fuel on the fire for us. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
okay. Here we are. So they give us. So they give you. It's like giving a biscuit to a dog. Isn't it? Well, how many biscuits do we have to give them to keep them happy till after the next election? So
Well,
I think.
anyways, Danny, thanks for having me on. I'm no Bruce Party, but I'm an
Well,
old dog with a bone. You know,
yeah. Well, good.
I
Well,
want
like yeah.
independence as much as possible.
I think you do, and I mean we're all working. I mean we're all working for our
Okay.
province, for our children, our grandchildren. You know what I mean? And so yeah, and I mean I think, but I think you make a good point. If everybody would like, I think everybody should call their MLA and say, look, where do you stand on independence? You know what I mean? And like some people can, I mean, like there's lots of people that were in our our Wild Rose Party that have they've dropped off. They've joined the local UCP board, and they're all excited about that. I say, well, and uh, and good for them. But I said, okay, and I mean, as you know, one of the things Vince Byfield talked about at in Brooks was being on the board, and being on the board of the provincial party. And now, what's this? Are we getting some questions here, or what
No,
do I
that's my
see? Just
report card.
Oh, that's your report card. No, 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 no. I see. Yeah, exactly. Fair enough. Okay, yeah. Well,
Okay,
but
thanks.
see, yeah. But one of the things that Vince mentioned was, that like the board should have some input into this too, and say like, what about this? Like, and I mean, I guess it wouldn't help the people who are strong conservatives. Particularly the ones on the provincial board should say, well, just a minute here. Like our own polling says, 70 some percent of our people want independence. So why were you saying your job is to get the number down? Like, who told you that was your job? Like, let's see where you got that in writing from the members or the board of directors or whoever. So I think
Well,
all
I mean,
these things.
you're saying like do it from within. And at the last AGM, they had a meeting and they had a lot of policy proposals. One of them was that we reject the idea of net carbon zero. We regard carbon dioxide as essential for life. And what has Smith done with that? Nothing.
Nothing. No, I know.
That
Well,
was it was
that's what.
almost unanimous. That was it
Yes.
was accepted.
Of course, yeah. But see that, but again, like it was Victor Davis Hanson said, like we're being governed by people who've never studied anything, except how to get elected. And some of these things are clever things. They go along and they let the members vote and everything, and then
Yeah.
they just ignore it. You know what I mean? They put in time, and I think it was you that was talking to me about the time frame. Like if this court thing, carries on until if they don't, if I mean it could go on for 5 or 6 months to where
It
it
has to
almost
be
gets.
resolved by May. Otherwise, we won't have it before the next election.
That's right. And so I mean, so then that can end up stalling off the whole process, and then you put it off. But again, I think I guess the only position those of us who are working at trying to force a vote, all we can do is keep talking to our friends and saying, look, if they won't give us a vote, like you're going to have to find either somebody on the inside, like you're going to have to find an MLA candidate on the inside of the party, or you're going to have to find somebody else and show them an option. And this goes back to Ralph Klein's "Show me a big enough parade, and I'd be happy enough to lead it." And so, what we as ordinary people have to do is create a parade that's I mean, and it seems to me that even some of the people that want to stay in the country, wouldn't you think they'd like to just have a vote and then say, okay, once and for all, we I don't know if you'd say once and for all, but I think you can only have a referendum every 5 years. Is that how often it is, or yeah. Although, like somebody said to me, what are you going to do if you lose? I said, well, I'm going to go home and drink some wine with my friends, and then I'm going to have a good sleep, and I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to start campaigning for the next referendum because, when Ted Byfield said, "Tell him you're leaving," and I told this to Premier Smith the other night too. I said, no, I think we can fix this. So I said, here we are, like 40 years ago. I was like her, and I thought maybe we could fix it, but I've certainly given up hope with that. So anyway,
Yeah.
appreciate you taking time. If you have any
Thank you.
final comments, if not, just we'll remind everybody to keep an eye. What do you tweet under? Right? Do you just tweet under Ron Voss? I know I follow
Well,
you, but
I'm
I don't even.
Ron Boss 5, I think. I'm the
Yeah,
fifth
Ron
Ron
Voss
Boss
5.
in the
Yeah,
building.
okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And anyway, well, thanks
Okay,
for
thanks,
joining
Eddie.
us. If you want to say goodnight, I'm just going to I'm just well, you can stay on while I ask our supporters to send us a few dollars if you want.
Okay. Okay.
But in it,
Good night.
okay, thanks. Yeah, good night. Thank you. So thanks everyone for listening. I just want to put in another. As you can see behind me, we've got Michael Wagner's books, No Other Option and Time to Leave, which I think. Anyone who's serious about having anyone who's serious about having you know a respectful discussion about independence and why Alberta would be better off as an independent country should buy those two books, and you should read them. It's only, what is it, 100 and some days till Christmas, and so you buy some and give them to your family members and friends for Christmas. And by all means, take a look for Corey Morgan's book, The Sovereignist Handbook, because again, as much as Michael, he has all the arguments, and one of the things that Corey says in his book is like be respectful of people. Like don't just uh, and I was in Calgary yesterday, and the fellow said, "Well, I like the idea of independence, but it's just not going to happen." And I said, "Well, maybe so." And one of the things that Corey said, "Well, just say, well, never say never," which I didn't quite say that, but I said, "Well, for 7,000 years, and in my lifetime, the left have mocked." Our oil sands by calling them the tar sands. But I said for about 7,000 years they were tar sands, and then some, people, from across Canada came to Alberta. I say with their old half tons and their young wives, and they figured out how to get tar to sand, and now it's the Fort McMurray, the oil sands projects are literally a miracle of the modern world. They've created unprecedented, wealth in our province and in our country. And as I said to Bruce Party, I said Alberta is always welcoming to people who want to come here to make our province better. You know what I mean? And so we're not opposed to people coming here to help us make our province better. There's lots to be done. And again, to quote Bruce Party again, who, for those of you who watched his podcast, and if you want to watch the podcast, you can go to wildroseloyaltycoalition.com and just click on YouTube, and then our podcasts are there. And I called him literally what Ayn Rand called a new intellectual, because Ayn Rand, for those of you, my understanding is they're taking some of Ayn Rand books out of our schools, which is almost unbelievable. But anyway, it just shows one more place where somebody has to be involved. And I certainly don't have the time for it, but some of you young parents should be. But in any event, what she said was like the intellectuals of the early 1900s, rather than defending the entrepreneurs that had created unprecedented wealth in human history in North America, they took the other side of it and chose to denigrate what they were doing. And so I look at Bruce Party and Jordan Peterson, some of them, Victor Davis Hanson, as like the new intellectuals that are actually defending the free enterprise system and trying to explain to all of us why why freedom and free enterprise has led to unprecedented prosperity for ordinary people. So anyway, thank you for taking time to join us. We're done a little bit early tonight, which is just great. And we'll, wildroseloyaltycoalition.com. Thank you very much. And I actually thought Corey, I was going to get a hold of Corey for tonight, but I think we had a miscommunication. So I'm hoping to have him on in the next couple of weeks. And we've got a group of other people that we're talking to, and we're going to try and keep these shows going on. We're trying to create basically a library and a wealth of information for people that they can refer to as they sort of join us on this journey or march to independence. So uh, Pam, or I don't know, did we have any questions, or is anybody, am I missing anything? I think you can send me a text or something, but I think we're good. So let's call it a night, and we'll be back here two weeks from tonight, we'll be back again, and I'll try and give you a little more notice on who our guest's going to be. And we thank you, as always. Both our Economic Education Association and our Wild Rose Loyalty Coalition can always use a few dollars if you have it. And if you don't, we just appreciate you taking the time to listen to us, help us spread the message together. Hopefully, we can build a better future for our children and grandchildren. So, thank you for being with me tonight, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night.